in between exhibitions, it takes me a long time before I can start painting. It takes me, even now, basically been 2 months and I am still unable to really make work. It takes me a long time to kind of mull over what I've previously done and what I want to do in the next sort of phase of my work. And so right now, I'm planning to go see the Met. I'm planning to go to the Guggenheim. I'm going to go, just spend time looking and researching. Generally, what I gravitate towards are Asian artifacts. It is just something that, for me, painting, looking at historical paintings, often I'm just looking at the technique. I feel disconnected from what was actually painted. Whereas when I'm looking at these objects from my ancestry, there's this connection that I feel to it. And so whether if it's catalogs that I'm looking at, actual objects in museums, I start to, I'll photograph it, I'll start writing, and I catalog it in my own way. And so once I've gathered enough information, that's when I'll start planning the next body of work.
Okay. When you say writing, what do you write?
Just thoughts, ideas, maybe something that I've read that relates to something that I want to make. It might just be a phrase, something a friend has said, something I heard in passing, anything really.
That just resonates with you at the moment.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to relate to art. It could just be just a phrase that I think is really beautiful. And then from that, I'll piece it together with maybe some imagery that I've seen. There's just specific objects that in each body of work I tend to gravitate towards. And so, for example, this body of work, I was looking at a lot of these horses that were buried with the dead, or camels that were buried with the dead. And so once I painted one painting with it, to make it make sense for myself, is I have to replicate a second painting about the same theme. Otherwise, it feels too much like a one-off. And so whether if I've found one image of this horse, then I'll find more images. I'll go research and find more images. And so there's always a sort of reference point. The Tang Dynasty was one of the first eras in China that really cataloged their arts, so like poetry, music, visual arts. And so I thought that was fascinating because, we talk about the Renaissance in Italy all the time, the Renaissance, and this is when art and philosophy was all cataloged. It was such an important time in Europe, and I think, in Asia, there just hasn't been that same conversation over here in the West, and I wanted to take these objects and highlight it. I really do believe in generational memory and how we may not be conscious of certain decisions that we make, but it all leads us, we're searching for those memories that are within our DNA. And so I think maybe for me, being gravitated towards these objects are in a way for me to search those generational memories. And I've always had an interest in archaeology and excavating of, the past, your own past, but also historical pasts, and thinking about the idea of how history is written, and oftentimes the inaccuracy of history, the accuracy and inaccuracy. And I think so for this work, I tend to blend those two. And so that's why it is a bit of, I don't know if fantasy is the right word, but like the uncanny or the surreal I find is interesting because it just depends on how a story is told. And so with starting with the horses, then I brought the camels in, and then from the camels, then I wanted to make some portraits of, you know, what this being would look like if they existed in this other realm. Because these are objects that were buried so that they would guide the afterlife. So they're supposed to guide you. A horse is buried with you, and when you pass, you're supposed to wake up in the afterlife with this horse. So that was the purpose of these funerary objects. And so while painting these paintings, I was thinking about this plane, you know, these people were in. When you pass, your life is gone, but all that is left are these objects that are left. And so the only way that we can remotely understand what went on back in the day is through objects. All the colors are in reference to actual glazes on the sculptures during the Tang Dynasty. So I really tried to focus on browns, greens, these golden tones and whites. Because I wanted to make it feel like these objects are coming to life. And during the Tang Dynasty, they only had access to these specific colors and glazes. They didn't have access to the colors that we have today. The show is in Shanghai, and my entire father's side of the family is from Shanghai. And so this exhibition is really meaningful to me because even though I cannot visit, it does feel like a homecoming for me because it is my motherland, and specifically Shanghai. My grandparents had to leave to find new opportunity, and so for me to come full circle, to make work, you know, to be raised in Canada and then to make work in America, to be exhibited back in my motherland is really special.